There are certain moments in life, quiet, unguarded, almost sacred moments, when the noise of the world falls away and a deeper voice begins to speak within us. It often happens at night, when the hour is late and the mind, no longer distracted by obligation, begins to turn inward. In those moments, a question rises from somewhere beyond ambition, beyond routine, beyond all the names and roles we have been given. Where am I truly going? Not where the calendar says I am going. Not where my profession, my responsibilities, or society's expectations have pointed me, but where this life itself is leading me. This fragile, passing, irreversible life. And if I continue on as I am, without awakening, what will remain of me when I finally reach the end? Human life, if we dare to look at it honestly, is less like a conquest than a journey, one long passage through time, as mysterious as it is brief. It begins in wonder. Childhood is the first bright station, where everything feels infinite and new, where the world is still untouched by comparison, anxiety, and the burden of becoming. Then comes youth, that fevered and luminous season, full of hunger, longing, urgency, illusion. In youth, we believe time is abundant. We believe strength is permanent. We believe that life is something waiting ahead of us, not something already unfolding beneath our feet. And then, almost without noticing, we enter the long middle stretch. The days grow crowded. We become busy. We become useful. We learn to endure. The scenery outside the window continues to change, but we are too occupied with survival, achievement, and responsibility to truly see it. Years pass not in dramatic revelation, but in accumulation. One task follows another. One season gives way to the next. And somewhere ahead, whether we prepare for it or not, whether we acknowledge it or deny it, there waits the final station, silent and certain, where every traveler must eventually step down. What frightens the human heart most is not death itself. Death remains mysterious, and mystery has a kind of dignity. Perhaps death is only a threshold. Perhaps it is a return, a stillness, a doorway into what language cannot hold. No, what terrifies us more deeply is something subtler and more merciless. The possibility of arriving at that final threshold and realizing in one clear and irreversible instant that we did not truly live. That we were occupied but not awake, successful perhaps but not fulfilled, admired perhaps but inwardly estranged from ourselves. That we spent our days gathering things that could never satisfy, protecting things that could never last, pursuing goals that were never truly ours. And then, in the end, life, so long while we were inside it, vanishes like breath against cold glass, leaving behind only the unbearable ache of two words: if only. Imagine, if you will, the final evening. The light has thinned, the sun has slipped quietly below the horizon. The air has softened into that strange, almost holy stillness that sometimes comes before night. You stand alone on the last platform. The train that carried you across the years has come to rest. There is no bargaining now, no extension, no postponement, no promise of later. In that hour, what becomes of all the things that once seemed so urgent, so essential, so worthy of your anxiety? Fame becomes smoke, wealth becomes dew. Status, reputation, applause, possessions, each one dissolves before the immense fact of impermanence. The world we spent so much of our strength trying to master reveals itself at last as something we were only ever passing through. And then there is the suitcase. All our lives, we have been filling it, quietly, daily, unconsciously. We place things inside it year after year. Ambition, resentment, sacrifice, pride, memory, regret, fear, tenderness, longing, grief, hope. Some things we pack deliberately. Others slip in unnoticed. We carry this invisible luggage through every season, often without stopping to examine what we are actually burdening ourselves with. Yet when the final station comes, there is no avoiding the opening of it. And what will we find there? Peace or exhaustion, gratitude or bitterness, lightness or the dead weight of everything we never released. This is one of the deepest truths of human life. In the end, we do not merely arrive with what we owned, we arrive with what we became. Perhaps the central tragedy of human existence is that we spend so much effort building the outer structure while neglecting the inner dwelling. We enlarge the house but forget the home. We refine the image but neglect the soul. We gather credentials, assets and symbols of importance while allowing the interior of our being to become crowded, cold, and uninhabitable. We live as though permanence were guaranteed. We behave as though time were renewable. We postpone joy until conditions improve. We delay rest until every duty is finished. We defer tenderness until after the next deadline. We tell ourselves that meaning can wait, that once the practical matters are finally resolved, we will return to what truly matters. But later has deceived more human beings than almost any other illusion. It arrives less often than we think, and when it does arrive, it is rarely in the form we imagined. The irony of our condition is almost painful in its simplicity. When we are young, we spend our health as though it were an inexhaustible inheritance. We sacrifice sleep for ambition, peace for advancement, stillness for productivity. We ignore fatigue and call it discipline. We eat in haste, live in tension, and glorify our own depletion as though exhaustion were a badge of virtue. Yet the body keeps its own quiet record. It remembers every excess, every neglect, every warning we refuse to hear. Organs do not flatter us, bones do not lie. The body is patient, but it is not forgetful. And one day, often after years of subtle compromise, it presents the bill. How many people spend their strongest years trying to secure a future they may never be healthy enough to enjoy? How many accumulate comfort only to find themselves unable to inhabit it? Wealth may purchase convenience, but it cannot buy back the breath once lost, the sleep once sacrificed, the vitality once squandered. What meaning does luxury hold to a body trapped in pain? What value is success when the simplest pleasures, a peaceful walk, a deep breath, an ordinary meal, have become difficult or impossible? Health is not merely one blessing among others. It is the quiet foundation beneath nearly every other blessing. Without it, much of what we chase becomes decorative, like beautiful lamps in a house no one can enter. Yet even beyond the body lies another form of poverty, less visible, but often more devastating: the poverty of the heart. How much of human life is spent constructing outward security while inwardly growing lonely? We build larger houses, finer homes, more polished lives, believing these things will reassure us that we matter, that we have succeeded, that we are safe from insignificance. We tell ourselves it is for dignity, for family, for stability, for the future. And yet, how often does the house become less a sanctuary than a monument to misplaced priorities? In youth, a grand staircase feels impressive. In old age, it becomes a burden to the knees. Spacious rooms that once symbolized achievement begin to echo with absence. Beautiful furniture becomes decoration for solitude. A home can be architecturally perfect and spiritually empty. Marble floors do not soften loneliness. High ceilings do not create warmth. A large dining table becomes a tragic object when no one gathers around it. We mistake ownership for belonging. We cling to property as though it can anchor us against impermanence. Yet every house eventually becomes someone else's address. Every treasured possession becomes, sooner or later, an object in another person's hands. The illusion is not that such things are useless. Shelter matters, beauty matters, comfort matters. But they are not enough. A true home is not measured in square footage, but in peace. It is not defined by its walls, but by the tenderness it shelters when life becomes difficult. It is not made noble by design, but by the quality of presence it holds. This same blindness extends into our closest relationships, where it wounds most deeply. There is often one person, perhaps a spouse, a companion, a lifelong witness, who walks beside us through the weather of years. This is the person who sees us not as performance, but as reality. They know our failures, our habits, our moods, our silences, our private fears. They have seen us unguarded. And yet, how strangely human it is that we often neglect the one who remains while performing kindness for those who barely matter. We speak gently to strangers, flatter colleagues, impress acquaintances, and then return home only to unload our fatigue, our frustration, our unprocessed anger onto the very person who has carried our life beside us. We assume love is durable enough to survive neglect. We assume loyalty requires no tending. We assume intimacy, once established, can sustain itself indefinitely. But the heart is not made of stone. It is more like a flame. It must be protected, fed, renewed. Most love does not die in catastrophe. It dies in erosion, in the apology never spoken, in the gratitude never expressed, in the tenderness postponed until another time, in the habit of assuming rather than cherishing. And then, when time has done what time always does, many discover too late that what they thought was secure had long since grown fragile. There are griefs in this world more painful than separation. One of them is realizing that love was present for years, and we failed to honor it while we still could. The same is true with children, perhaps even more painfully so. Many parents sincerely believe they are sacrificing everything for their children. And often, in material terms, they are. They work long hours, endure hardship, suppress their own desires, and pour themselves into providing a better life. Yet children do not grow on provision alone. They require presence. They need attention more than abundance, warmth more than wealth, listening more than logistics. A child can live in a beautiful house and still feel emotionally homeless. A room can be full of toys and yet remain cold. There are many adults who were materially cared for but spiritually starved, who inherited stability but not tenderness, resources but not intimacy. Then later, in old age, many parents long for what they once did not know how to give. They wait for visits, for calls, for affection, for the sound of returning footsteps. They hope for devotion. But what often returns is not cruelty. It is distance. And distance, more often than not, is something learned. Money can hire assistance, but it cannot purchase heartfelt care. It can pay for comfort, but not for love. The deepest inheritance a parent gives is not property or savings. It is emotional memory, the felt knowledge in a child's body and soul that they were truly loved, truly seen, truly safe. Much of our suffering is bound to another illusion, the worship of status. How much of human energy is spent polishing a name? Titles, degrees, promotions, awards, recognition, prestige, these become the secular idols of modern life. We crave the reflected light of public approval because we hope it will confirm what we fear privately, whether we are enough. We hang our accomplishments on walls and our identities upon them, as though external validation could quiet internal emptiness. But what happens when the role ends? When retirement comes? When the office door closes? When the title no longer precedes our name? Does status keep vigil by the bedside? Does reputation sit with us in grief? Do old honors warm the room when the body weakens and the soul longs for comfort? Much of reputation is moonlight on water, beautiful from a distance, shimmering and admired, but impossible to grasp. Often what the world reveres is not the person, but the position. When the chair is gone, the applause fades. To build a life around public image is to discover too late that one has been decorating a mask. And so too with many friendships. As long as we are strong, prosperous, useful, or entertaining, companionship comes easily. Invitations multiply. Messages arrive. Laughter fills the room. We mistake social activity for intimacy. But adversity is a ruthless revealer. Let the money thin, the influence fade, the body weaken, and many companions disappear as quietly as they appeared. Relationships built on convenience collapse the moment convenience ends. The true friend is not the one who praises you in public, but the one who remains in private suffering. The one who sits beside your hospital bed. The one who calls when there is nothing to gain. The one who knows your heart rather than your usefulness. Yet perhaps the deepest sorrow of all is not physical decline, not loneliness, not even regret over relationships. Perhaps the deepest sorrow is the discovery that one has lived a borrowed life. There are countless people in this world who do not truly live according to the rhythm of their own soul. They live according to expectation, family expectation, social expectation, cultural expectation, the quiet tyranny of comparison. They choose careers they do not love, inhabit identities that no longer fit, pursue goals they did not choose, buy things they do not need, silence desires that once felt sacred, and spend decades performing a version of themselves that is acceptable to others. They wear masks so faithfully that eventually they forget the shape of their own face. There are people who wanted to sing but became silent. People who wanted to paint but became practical. People who longed to travel, to write, to begin again, to live simply, to speak honestly, to love more openly, to rest more deeply. But fear kept them obedient. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of disappointing others, fear of looking foolish. So they postponed authenticity in exchange for approval. They preserved appearances while slowly abandoning themselves. But the opinions we surrender our freedom to are often far less significant than we imagine. Most people are too preoccupied with their own lives to think about us as much as we fear. To sacrifice the soul in order to maintain an image is one of the most expensive bargains a human being can make. Then there is resentment, the old poison so many carry as though it were a form of loyalty. Human beings are strangely faithful to their wounds. We revisit betrayals until they become part of our identity. We rehearse injuries until they harden into self-definition. We imagine that by holding on to anger, we preserve justice. But resentment is a coal we grasp in order to throw at another. The first hand it burns is our own. Often the people who hurt us have long since moved on, forgotten, changed, or disappeared. Yet we remain inhabited by the injury, punishing ourselves in their absence. To forgive is not to deny harm. It is not to excuse what was cruel, careless, or unjust. It is not moral amnesia. Forgiveness is something deeper and harder. It is the refusal to remain internally occupied by what should have passed. It is the reclamation of inner space. It is the quiet decision that one's heart will not remain a cemetery for old injuries. And perhaps the most difficult forgiveness is not for others, but for oneself. Many people enter later life carrying an invisible tribunal inside them. They replay their failures, their omissions, their harsh words, their lost opportunities, their cowardice, their shame. They revisit old mistakes as though pain might somehow rewrite them. But regret was never meant to be a prison. It was meant to be a bell. It rings not to condemn us forever, but to awaken us. If you have harmed, make amends where you can. If someone is gone, honor them by how you live now. Let remorse become transformation, not self-torment. Self-compassion is not weakness, it is moral maturity. No human being passes through life unstained. Even the brightest soul casts a shadow. And still, perhaps the softest and most dangerous lie of all is the word someday. Someday I will rest. Someday I will call them. Someday I will travel. Someday I will begin again. Someday I will write the book, tell the truth, heal the wound, say I'm sorry, say I love you, change my life, forgive myself, become who I'm meant to be. But time is not a patient servant. It is a quiet thief. It steals gradually, politely, almost invisibly, until what was once easy becomes difficult, and what once seemed possible becomes unreachable. The perfect moment rarely comes. The future we trust so casually is one of the least reliable things in existence. Dreams deferred do not remain suspended in innocence. They age with us. They lose light. They grow heavier. The body tires. The spirit hardens. The window narrows. This is why the words we never say become some of the heaviest things in the suitcase. There is a silence in many homes more painful than conflict, not the silence of peace, but the silence of withheld love. How many years pass without a sincere thank you? Without I'm sorry? Without I forgive you? Without I need you? I miss you? I was wrong? I love you? We assume our sacrifices are visible. We assume our loyalty is understood. We imagine affection can remain safely implied forever. But love that is never expressed can become invisible even to those who most need to feel it. At funerals, grief is rarely simple. It is often braided with regret, the apology delayed, the tenderness withheld, the gratitude never voiced. The dead do not need our words. The living do. So what then is wisdom? Perhaps wisdom is not complexity. Perhaps it is not the accumulation of theories, doctrines, or lofty abstractions. Perhaps wisdom is simply this: to understand impermanence deeply enough that it changes how we live now. To stop treating life as rehearsal. To stop confusing accumulation with fulfillment. To recognize that what matters most has always been strangely simple, strangely close, and strangely easy to overlook. The final station, if we are willing to learn from it before we arrive, is not merely an ending. It is a teacher, It clarifies in advance what cannot be carried across. We will not step off that train with our bank accounts, our titles, our trophies, our properties, our curated image, our social rank, or our carefully defended pride. We will carry only the invisible things: the love we gave, the truth we lived, the peace we cultivated, the courage we practiced, the burdens we released, the wounds we healed, the grace with which we learned to let go. We enter this world empty-handed, and we leave it the same way. Everything in between is not a chance to possess, but a chance to become. So before that final evening comes, before the platform grows still, before the light thins, before the train comes to rest, it is worth examining the luggage. Remove the resentment. It is heavier than you know. Set down the vanity. It was never warmth. Discard the need to impress. It has already stolen enough years. Unpack the old grievances that no longer deserve a room in you. Loosen your grip on the image you have been performing. Make room instead for gratitude, for tenderness, for courage, for humility, for presence, for laughter that is not postponed, for the ordinary meal eaten slowly with someone you love, for a walk beneath trees, for sleep honestly earned, for the apology made while it can still be heard, for the hand reached out while the other hand can still answer. To live well is not to avoid sorrow. No life is spared pain. No journey is free of disappointment, illness, uncertainty, separation, or loss. The road will wound us, that is certain. The question is not whether suffering will come, but whether suffering will deepen us or harden us. Whether grief will make us more human or more closed. Whether failure will embitter us or clarify us. Whether we will choose awareness over habit, sincerity over performance, love over pride, and presence over postponement. If we do, if we live even imperfectly in that spirit, then when the final station comes, as it surely will, we may not stand there in terror before the dark. We may stand there instead with a strange calm. Not because our life was flawless, but because it was real. Because we did not wait forever to become honest. Because we did not spend every year worshipping illusions. Because we suffered, yes, but we also loved. Because we failed, but we learned. Because we lost, but we softened instead of becoming cruel. Because we worked, but did not forget wonder. Because we were wounded, but did not let our wounds become our identity. Because we were mortal, and allowed that truth to make us tender rather than afraid. Then perhaps we may look back on the journey not as one who conquered, but as one who understood. We may bow our heads to all that life gave and all that it took. We may bless even the sorrows that taught us what mattered. And we may step forward without bitterness, without frantic clinging, without the anguish of unfinished truth. For in the end, the most beautiful fate is not to die surrounded by possessions, nor praised by reputation, nor remembered for status. It is something quieter, rarer, and infinitely more profound. It is to arrive at the last platform carrying a light heart, to have lived deeply enough that departure feels not like theft, but like completion, to have loved honestly enough that nothing essential remains locked behind silence, to have awakened early enough that the final station is not an interruption, but the natural closing of a meaningful passage. And perhaps that is the true art of living. Not merely to travel far, not merely to accumulate much, not merely to be seen, admired, or applauded, but to arrive with as little regret as possible, having been fully present for the brief and sacred miracle of being here at all. For the world will always tempt us to postpone life in the name of preparing for it. It will tell us to hurry, to compare, to acquire, to prove, to defend, to compete, to build a name strong enough to resist oblivion. But the soul asks something simpler and harder. It asks us to be awake, to notice, to love while we can, to speak while we can, to forgive while we can, to become gentle before time forces gentleness upon us, to understand before the end teaches us by necessity that almost everything we cling to will one day fall from our hands. What remains then is not what we owned, but what we offered, not what we displayed, but what we embodied, not what the world said about us, but who we became when no one was watching. And if, on that final evening, when the sky grows dim and the last silence gathers around us, we can stand there, not with the cry of "if only," but with the quiet knowledge that we loved, that we tried, that we awakened, that we did not waste the gift, then perhaps nothing essential has been lost. Then perhaps the journey, with all its wounds and wonders, was enough. Then perhaps we may step into the unknown not as beggars clinging to what must be left behind, but as travelers who have finally learned the deepest secret of the road. That the purpose of life was never to carry everything. It was to learn, before the end, what was never worth carrying at all.